Hey Puddin'! Today we're making a Joker and Harley Quinn top. That's no laughing matter. I'm Blakey Kay, and in my last video we made a bombshell-inspired skirt, and if you want to check that out, links in the description below. But I decided that I totally need a top to go with it too. So I took inspiration from Batman the Animated Series and decided to make a cool top with this vintage 50s pattern. So let's do this.
I found this amazing Harley Quinn and Joker fabric at the local Joann's. It gives me all the nostalgia vibes. This pattern is a Reproduction simplicity pattern from the 50s. We're going to pin the pattern piece on for our band. And then we're going to pin our side pieces on. And a top bodice panel. One thing I want to note with this pattern is the top piece here is like crazy diamond shape. It was kind of hard to line up on this because it's got this weird offset shape on my fabric that has straight lines on it, but it ended up working out. Besides that, this pattern is really big on me. I don't know whether the sizing was off on it or like I just miscalculated, but something was off. Next up is our lining piece. We're going to use black for our straps as well. So this long one's our strap. There's our weird diamond triangle-y piece, our side piece, and our straps. All of these are two mirrored images. And then we're gonna need some interfacing for the side pieces. This is just like fusible iron-on interfacing. We want a medium weight interfacing to give it some structure, some body. I need it to be stiff. It's just like a stiff drink. Done. Cut. So we're going to take our main pieces here and we are going to do a series of basting stitches along our center. There's little dots on the pattern and you're gonna from dot to dot. The front is a gathered piece on this pattern and it has two basting stitches along the front of both the main piece along with the lining piece. So I'm just throwing in some basting stitches here. You're gonna do one right after another. And then same thing on our lining piece. You're gonna go from dot to dot.
And now it's time for the tedious part of gathering our fabric.
Once all your basting stitches are in, you're going to pull both strings here. The reason we're doing two strings is in case you snap one or something and you, for some reason, can't get it to go. You have two. You got a backup. You're doing great. Look at you go. Just kind of, you know, tug on them heartstrings. This pattern called for 3 inches, which seemed really big to me at the time, and it was, and I'm glad that I took it in way more than that. I'm making it way smaller. It's like 1.5 inches. Then you're gonna pop a pin in that and wrap it around. You know, we can make anything fit if we want to. And then you're going to do that to all 4 pieces, both lining pieces and both main fabric pieces. Now that our pieces are gathered, we have to make them one. They must join. They must be together. And stitch them to make them one. Heck yeah, backstitch. I don't do vintage patterns very often, so this is kind of a learning curve for me, but it was a really fun sew nonetheless. We're going to do the same exact thing to our main piece. We're just going to make our center seam here. So throw a bunch of pins in that beast and stitch across, backstitch a few times. Just make sure it's nice and secure in there. And I don't know why it came out so big, but it did. It's okay. We're going to gather it down. And so we're going to do a little gathering on the side as well. There's a couple little dots. You're going to go from dot to dot, and you are going to just do a couple wide old basting stitches in them. And you're going to do this for both the lining as well as the main fabric piece so they can match up all perfect like. And we're gonna do interfacing for our side pieces as well. So you're gonna pop these in your press if you have one. If you don't, use regular iron. Put a pressing cloth, a little water, steam that beast on.
Once your interfacing's all pressed on, now it's time to sew.
We're gonna gather the sides here and you're gonna line up your pieces from dot to dot. Pin them bad boys right on there. Take your time stitching this bad boy down and stitch that on. There's not interfacing on the main piece, it's just on the lining. Look at that seam, looks all nice and shit. Gotta do the other side and the main piece. Time for the straps. So we are going to pin them in half all the way down. These two long old straps. We went with black straps here so they can kind of stand out on our print of the fabric. Stitch them down with your seam allowance. And you're gonna do the same exact thing to the second one. Merrily, merrily, life is but a dream, all the way down the seam. We're gonna turn these bad boys, grab your safety pin, pop it in that seam allowance, and then you're going to just flip it right inside the hole that you have created and just work it all the way down. Ooh, work it, girl, work it. Do the second one. Work it, work it, work it. And then you could take them bad boys and go press them nice and flat. Now that we have our straps, we are going to take these and we are going to pin them in place on the back portion of your bodice piece. And then we're just going to tack them in place, do a couple forward and back stitches here. Just make sure they're not moving around all crazy like. And then you're going to take your lining piece and you are going to go all the way around and take your time pinning the whole thing, Do it all. Pin it. Pin that bad boy. Look how cute this is already. Oh my gosh, it looks so cute. You see all these vintage patterns and they had some cute shit. You're gonna sew along your sides. Sew all along the top. It's not as easy as it looks. It gets a little hairy when you get down here by the gathering, but just go a little slow and all the way around to the end. Don't forget to backstitch. Clip your corners. Snip your curves. Get in that curve, girl. If there's a chunky bitch, you just snip that shit out. Now that you're clipping all these curves, it's gonna make it lay nice and flat. Now we're gonna flip it open and you are going to top stitch the lining piece, and what this is gonna do is gonna make sure your lining doesn't show. It just kind of holds your seam really tight. This is going to make sure when you have it flipped the correct way that your lining doesn't peek out. See, look, now you flip it and you'll be good. You'll be showing any lining. Now that we have our lining and our main pieces together, we're gonna baste down the bottom part as well, but we're just gonna do the back for right now and you'll see why in a minute. Don't do your front cup section yet. You could put foam cups in here at this point if you wanted, but I'm not doing that. It's got a lot of gathers. It kind of gives you a fullness that you don't really need cups. Baste down the other section. All that baste in your face. It'll be great. Once your sides are based in place, you are going to take a second and grab out your needle and thread. Okay, we're doing old school shit. This is a vintage pattern. We're doing vintage shit, man. I'm gonna hand sew the center section here because it'll look better. I can sew on top of my previous seams and it will line up perfectly, and that's something you just can't do with a sewing machine. Now that that's done, you can actually go through and baste the center portion of this down. That way when you put your band on, it doesn't get all crazy. And then we're putting our straps on. This is a lot. This is a lot of extra fabric here. Try your shit on. Like I said in the beginning, it was big on me. But we're gonna sew across the band portion, and the instructions didn't really say whether you put it next to the seam or on top of the seam, so I just put it over it because I don't want to see it. And I think it actually looks pretty cute. You're gonna tack it at the bottom, and then you're gonna just top stitch the top. I think if I were to do this again, I would go with a top stitch along both edges of it. I just did one side, but I mean, it works too. And again, it was so big. Look how much I'm cutting off of the freaking bottom. That's a lot, dude. Onto the band. Okay, this band is a little different than your average band. This is kind of a cool section of this. So you're gonna clip that little center notch here. And this just makes it form to the cup portion of your top better, because we're folding this in half, but we need this to be curved so it follows the curve of our top. And we're going to press down for seam allowances. Even in this weird little corner thingy, take your time with this. Take your time with this. You're gonna have to iron this really well. It's not an easy task of doing the ironing portion here, but it's necessary. Now that it is all ironed and pressed and ready to go, it'll make your life so much easier. So we're gonna pin the band on, and you're gonna start right in this little center section here, and then go to the edges and just line those up. And then you're just gonna pin all along the edge of the whole bottom section here. You're gonna use a crap load of pin here. Do lots of pins, all the pins. The more pins, the merrier. You don't want your piece to slip. This is important to lay straight and flat on your body. Now we're gonna take that and we are going to sew our waistband on. You can go right on top of your basting stitch if you don't feel like pulling them bitches out like me. If you sew a little bit above them, you won't have to worry about it if they show. Just, you know, take your good old seam ripper friend and pop them stitches out and it'll be fine. So once you have that on, you're going to take a second to trim your seam allowance here, because there was quite a bit of seam allowance, and just use your fabric scissors in the center portion here, because if you don't, you could accidentally nick your stitches and it would be bad, because then you would undo all the stuff you just did. Don't do that. Nobody wants to undo stuff. And once you have that all clipped and trimmed, you're going to flip your band, and again, you're gonna pin the crap out of it. Start in the center, pin the crap out of the center, and then you are gonna top stitch it down here and go very slow. You have a lot of pins, but if you go slow, you will always catch your back and it will look great. It gets very hairy again in here because of that awkward angle that our band is cut at, but it actually makes it lay really nicely once it's on your body.
Since I'm extra, I'm making my own buttons. It's time to play with resin.
We're playing with resin today, and we went with green and holographic because sparkles are life. Shine bright like a diamond, yo. We used UV resin and some liquid colors, and we have this cool little button mold that I found on Amazon. This took me quite a few tries, but these came out really freaking cute. I'm gonna be making more buttons, okay guys? It's kind of addicting to make the resin buttons, I'm not gonna lie. And we're popping it in my nail lamp, and it's gonna cure in like 2 minutes, dude. It's pretty freaking cool, it's like magic. Okay, pop them bad boys out, and yeah, they're cute. We're gonna leave them on there so we can bake them again to make sure they're hard. And I did a bunch of these because you never know. You just want to get the best things you can get. So you cure them in the lamp, pull them out. You can cure them a couple times just to make sure they're really hard.
Unfortunately, the fit of this bad boy didn't quite work out the way I hoped, so we're gonna have to add a bunch more buttons. Way more than the pattern calls for, but it actually looks pretty cool. So let's go with it.
Thankfully, I made a lot of buttons. A lot of them. Here, we're going to make our buttonholes. This pattern called for 2 and 6 is what I ended up doing, which is a lot. So we kind of ended up going into like the seam allowance in a couple of the sections here, but you can't really tell. It ended up looking cute. So do some buttonholes. There's a lot of cool tutorials out there to really tell you how to get the correct size for your buttons. Make sure you thread lock them, then you can seam rip them open. And check to make sure our buttons fit through them. And then I marked off where your buttons lie, and we're gonna hand stitch these bitches on. There's 6 of them in total, and since it wasn't supposed to be 6, they kind of went into the seam allowance a little bit, but thankfully this fabric itself is pretty busy and it ended up just looking really cool. I tried it on about 1,000 times and like readjusted many things to actually make this fit in the end, but I really like the 6 buttons in the end anyways. I think it looked like a style choice, which I'm fine with because it actually looks really freaking cool. She's done. This pattern was a lot more difficult than I anticipated. It needed more fit adjustments, and I'm not sure if that was user error or the fact that it's a vintage pattern, but I tried it on as we went and it turned out really cute in the end. And we're going to take this bad boy to Bassrush. I'm doing Festy with my Bessie. I originally intended using this with the bombshell skirt, but that didn't happen. A lot changed and we ended up moving to Florida. I did a lot of crazy stuff. So instead, I made these red bottoms. If you really like it, leave a comment below. Now that we're in Florida, we have so much more in store, so make sure you ring that notification bell. And if you want to see a sneak preview of upcoming projects, follow me on Instagram as well at Blakey_Kay. And we can have so much more fun sewing adventures. Come along with me.